Well, everybody, welcome to Locker Room. This is Southland's podcast for men, where we try to talk about the right things in the right ways, which men are not always known for. This is the most recent season in the year 2021 of our Lord. James has given me a signal. The seventh season?
Eighth season.
Eighth season.
Man.
All right. I like how we roll these out. It has nothing to do with the actual year that we're in. It's just, okay, we took a break for a little while. Next season, we roll it out. So this is the eighth season. So what we're going to try to do in this season, and if you're new with us, go back and listen to all those other ones. Those will keep you busy for a little while. But in this season, we're going to try to talk about some hot button issues. We're now in the year 2021. 2020 was hot. It was hot. It was wild. And with certain things, as much as I like to respond and react in the moment, sometimes I'm a little smarter than what I appear sometimes, not always, and wait a little while, And so I have two friends with me here today. I have my friend Rod Butler and my friend Ariea King here with me, and we're going to talk about race today, all right? Now, this podcast is both audio and video, but I would like you all to disclose the race that you identify with.
I just want to let y'all know I'm a black fella.
For all the listeners out there.
I just tried to sound country, but my normal voice is country anyway. But yeah, I'm a black dude. So white people, don't call me a person of color. Don't call me African American because you might offend some Africans. Just call me a black dude. I'm a black dude.
And your name is Rod Butler.
Yeah, Rod.
And so we dove right in there. So I'll be super honest with you. And Ariea, go ahead.
American. I'm an American.
All right. Okay. Is that a race? Last I checked, I don't know.
No, it's my nationality.
Okay, but I asked what race you identify with or as.
I'm a black dude.
Okay. All right. So both of you have just used the word black, which is the word that I grew up with, being 41 years old. Every black friend I've ever had, I just referred to as black, and I was referred to as white. We've now arrived here in 2021 where I'm supposed to call you a person of color. Now, that infers at least a couple things in my mind. One is that there are people who are not of a color. Mm-hmm. I guess that's me. But
I would disagree.
Well, I would too. But I mean, if you say I'm a person, people of color, who isn't that?
Right. Exactly.
I grew up singing the song "Red and Yellow, Black and White." They're all precious in His sight.
Exactly.
I didn't know we had, So the other one is the word color is really close to colored.
Yeah.
Which again, I grew up. That was not a place you went with people. That was what my racist family members used was, the word colored, So for me, I'm going, I don't feel comfortable saying person of color or people of color. I'm cool with black. Is that still okay?
Yeah.
I brought this up to a friend. I was like, man, it seemed like it's semantics, right? Colored people of color. So you stick a proposition.
All you did was switch
the words around and threw a proposition in, hey, you're people of color.
Hey,
no, I'm a person of heavy melanation. There you go. Okay.
Relatively speaking,
right,
compared to me,
right. Because I had this comparison. I thought about this. I was like, if you and I stood in one end of the end zone and Rod stood at the other, I think he would have a hard time, other than the height difference between you and I think he would have a hard time determining who was darker, right?
Yeah. He would be able to tell who's better looking still.
Absolutely, because that beard is killing it, man. I just want you to know. The beard
I was referring to you because
the beard is shutting down the
man.
preacher game. The beard.
Y'all two go have a baby. Man. This love fest. Man, your beard, man. That beard's
Rod, I love you too, man. I love you, Rod.
Let's just talk about the fact that Scott and I are doing normal dude things here. We T-shirts, shorts. You over here got your little button down. You had your outfit picked out for a couple weeks, ain't you?
My mama raised me right.
Well, now that this will segue perfectly. So where were you raised, Ariea? So I want to hear from where you guys are from, where you grew up.
I'm originally from Mount Sterling, Kentucky, which is about 30 miles east of here. Born and raised there. Youngest out of 6, so I had 5 older brothers and a sister. So I like I said, born and raised there. And I came to Lexington like in 97, 98.
Okay.
I've lived here for like the last 20 plus years.
All right.
Grew up in a church. I would say my parents did a wonderful job at laying that Christian foundation for me. But, as I got older, I realized it required me to do work to build on that foundation. I did come from a 2-parent home, but by no means was it perfect by any means. But I'm very grateful for the job that they did in giving me the opportunity to come to know Jesus in the way that I did.
Yeah.
I moved over here in 97. Shortly after that, I met my wife, Casey. We have 3 beautiful kids. We've been married for 11 years. And then probably around 2008 is when I showed up at Southland. Unsure about Southland, not because, I'm coming from, some other type of traditions in the Baptist church. So I was a little taken aback to some of the things that I saw when I came in here to the different styles of worship. But one of the things that drew me in was the teaching. There was things that I was being challenged on that I'd never been challenged before. And just over time, man, I just kept coming back because I like what God was doing in my life here and just waking me up to his truth.
Yeah. Rod, where are you from?
South Kakalaki, good old South Carolina. Born and raised there, lived there for about 26 years. Came to Kentucky in 2008, into 2008. Met my wife when we were in South Carolina. We moved here. We got 2 amazing kids, Layla, Noah. Let's see here. So I grew up Baptist church also. I was kind of introduced to Jesus through many hours of being in church on Sunday. Like, man, we literally went to church one Sunday, and it was like break of dawn. The sun hadn't even came up yet. And, man, we go to church, and it felt like we were there all day. And we walk outside, and the sky looked the same as it did that morning. I was
just
like,
on the other side.
I was like, man, I must have been dreaming.
Dusk to dawn.
Then on the way home, it's getting darker and darker. I'm like, we just spent the whole day at church, man. The whole day. Like, man, when I tell you we went to church all the time on Sunday, like, man, it was dusk till dawn type thing. But similar to Ariea, I came to Southland in like 2009, and there were a lot of things, like, I would say I was introduced to Jesus when I lived in South Carolina, but Southland helped me really find Jesus and really cultivate a relationship with him, just because a lot of the teachings were, more accurate. They gave me a truer perspective of what it meant to actually be a follower of Jesus. So, yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about race today, and so one of the things I wanted to hear from you all was, what are some of your first recollections of experiencing racism? And, with racism being so prevalent in the news, talked about so often, as it really has been our whole lives, but there's certain moments along the way where it seems to really hit the fan, right? Obviously 2020 was one of those. Yeah. So maybe how do you define racism, and then, when do you first remember experiencing it? And you can go in whatever order you want with that.
Oh, I'll tee it up here for go ahead there, brother. Go ahead, man.
Well, first I would define racism as implicit or explicit attitudes and behaviors towards another group of people that are different from you, and you treat those people according to those attitudes or those behaviors to the point where you would have them to feel inferior to you.
Yeah.
That's just my little short version of how I would describe racism.
So like the belief that one race has superiority or inferiority to other races.
Exactly.
Just because of their race.
Just because of their race, right, or the way they look.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and so my first encounter that I can recall, like I said, I'm from Mount Sterling, but Mount Sterling has like these micropolitan type cities that surrounds it, and so, in elementary, when you're a kid, you really don't. It's hard. Like, I can see it now, just in the schools. Like, I had an opportunity to work in elementary schools. Kids really don't. They don't focus on that at all. Mm-hmm. They really don't. And so for me, it was the same thing in elementary. But by the time I went to middle school, like you had these other little pockets of town. They had those kids that were funnel into the middle school. And so in those pockets of town, like I remember having conversations with some of those kids. They talked about how they never really engaged with a black person before until they came to the middle school. So they're growing up in those towns, and so you can only believe what type of attitudes or type of mindset that they could have developed about people that look different from them and things that they've heard. And so in the 6th grade, it was this kid. I remember his name, but I won't say his name. But this kid,
let the people know his name.
But okay, his name was Jeff Holder, and Jeff Holder had called me the N-word. Yeah. And when he called me that, in that moment, you have to make a decision. Do you respond in the way that your mother had told you to respond?
Well, that's my very next question is going to be how were you taught to respond?
Okay, so I had two conflicting responses to this. Okay, so my mother, her response was, son, first you tell them that's not your name, and two, and most importantly, you're a child of God. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Like, I love that.
That sounds good.
It sounds good.
That sounds really
wonderful.
Good.
All right? Until
right.
you got 5 older brothers.
Yeah.
Okay. And so my oldest brother's 20 years older than me. So his influence wasn't necessarily on me, but it trickled down through the other siblings. And so I have the brother who's like 4 years older than me. He's like, yeah, look, mom don't get it. Okay.
So smile and nod at mom.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, that sounds nice and everything. He's like, but dude, I'm telling you now, you go into that hallway and one of those kids call you that. He's like, it has to be a physical confrontation because there's a big misunderstanding that has to take place.
Yeah.
And so, and not only that, man, you have kids in my community, man, even though a kid may be a sophomore in high school, me being a 6th grader, I still knew him because we grew up in the same community. So you could not have this like perception about you that you was the kid that was going to let
take that.
Yeah. Like, so, because if that happened, I got to deal with the kids on the bus, and then I got to go home and deal with my brothers. Right. So, mom, I loved your response, but I had to engage in this physical altercation because of what he said to me. So that was my response. But I remember after that happened, we both went to the principal's office. Of course, this is back when they still paddled. We both got a paddling, and we somehow ended up in the bathroom on the way back to class. And this kid looks at me, and he looks at me. He said, "Hey man, I'm sorry I said that to you." And it caught me off guard because I was like, well, I guess we're going to go again. Like, we're in this bathroom. There's no teachers in here to break it up. And he says, hey, man, I'm sorry I said that to you. I was like, man, don't even worry about it.
Did you sense it was sincere?
Yeah. It was just him and I. Like, what other reason why he had to say it? We were the only two in that bathroom. And he says to me, hey, dude, I'm sorry I called you that name. And in that moment, man, I forgave him. Now, I'm not going to say I forgave him because I was a Christian.
Right.
I knew about Christ, but I was not living for Christ at that moment.
Right.
But I think that's one of those innate qualities that we have that Jesus imparts upon us, Christ gives us. Forgave the dude, and we went on, and we went about our life.
So that's a super interesting story because if you tried, so what year was that roughly?
Oh, man, 89, 88, okay. 89.
So in my frame of reference, that ain't that long ago.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
But just imagine for one moment that story being transported into the year 2021. You guys are both school teachers, all right, in different school systems. That would not play out that way.
No.
Right?
No.
At all.
No. I mean, it's got an interesting twist to it now because, being in the schools, it wouldn't play out in that way because now there's white kids in the hall using that word, calling the other white kid that.
Right.
Like it's been accepted now. Like it's been widely accepted, and you see these kids, and I'm like, do you know what you're saying? Do you even have a clue to what you're saying? Right. But the culture has made it, and this is where I'm very heartbroken about the hip hop culture. I grew up in that culture. Like that's who I am. Like I'm still a hip hop guy all day long. But, that's one of the things that upsets me about the culture because the things they have made okay should not be okay.
Right.
And it bothers me deeply. And then these kids who are, bringing themselves to this culture, they walking away because they'll tell you, like some of these kids will tell you, well, my friends let me say it. I'm like, so now you have a green card to use the N-word. Is that what you're telling me? I'm like, you do understand, like if you walk into certain neighborhoods and you don't understand that region in which you're walking
that
into.
card won't work there. That's right.
Dude, that's not going to help you.
Right.
So
okay, interesting. More to talk about there. Go ahead and unpack your experiences, Ron.
So I would say my first experience where I kind of became aware of racism was around about the 4th grade. My mom, she used to work a lot. She had like 2 jobs. So, my dad wasn't around. So we spent a lot of time with my grandparents. Mm-hmm. But, getting home from school, my mom for like a year decided to put us on a bus. So my school's population, like a lot of my cousins, they went to schools where it was predominantly black. The school I went to, I was like the only black kid in my class for like all through grade school, all the way up through middle school. I don't think it was till high school till I got like another black kid in my class. But the area that we lived in, like all of us, all the black families kind of lived on this 1-2 little streets in that town. And so we all rode the bus together. And man, I remember one time getting dropped off and we're riding through the neighborhood and some of my friends' black parents are like standing outside just like looking angry. I'm like, man, what's the deal with them? So like we get off the bus and they were like, hey, y'all do realize that she's got all the black kids sitting on the back of the bus. and like, man, we started like kind of looking like, dang, man, like she really does have all of us sitting on the back of the bus. Like it didn't matter whether we were good kids. Like she had it in her mind. White kids sit at the front, black kids sit at the back. And so a lot of these parents kind of brought it to her attention. And she was like, okay, so her way of circumventing it is there was another kid who rode our bus who his mom was a bus driver also. She basically put this one kid at the back of the bus with all the...
So don't move any of the black kids up. Move one of the white kids back. Is that what you told me the solution was?
Yeah, she moved this one white kid to the back of the bus.
You're the white Rosa Parks. You're moving to the back of the bus.
And man, so that was kind of the first, like, man, like, dang, like, we just got put on the back of the bus like we were just 2 different class of people. And as we moved into middle school was when you really started to become aware of, like, differences. And, like, middle school was when I started to see it more from adults than I did kids. Because, like, when I hit middle school, Tupac, Biggie, they were becoming big. You had the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yeah.
And so
he's a youngster. He's a youngster.
So like one of the things that happened during this time period, and in South Carolina, for the longest time, the Confederate flag was flying on top of the State House.
Right? State House.
Yeah. So I remember going to school, and I didn't have any of these shirts because, I mean, my family didn't have a lot of money, but a lot of my black friends, they would wear shirts that had like Tupac or Biggie's face on it, just their face on it. Or, they had a shirt that had O.J. Simpson on it, and all it said was, the juice is loose. Man, I remember one time, man, we all got called to the office, and we were basically told, these shirts are offensive. You are to never wear them again. You wear them to school again, you're going to get put up for expulsion.
Meanwhile, white kids are wearing Guns N' Roses T-shirts.
No. White kids were wearing worse.
Well,
they actually had a shirt with the Confederate flag on it that said, it's a white thing.
Wow.
Y'all don't understand.
Wow.
And, man, we were just sitting here like, oh, so we got a picture of, like, Biggie, Tupac on a shirt. You're telling it, like, not suspension, expulsion. You're going to kick us out of school for the whole year. And it's like, man, we had the Confederate flag thrown in our face so much. And, man, we used to be like, man, what's the deal? Like, how are y'all justifying this? And we were always told stuff like, well, it's your heritage. You need to embrace it. I'm like, yeah, but y'all lost. like you lost, man. Like the Confederacy doesn't exist anymore. Like, can we move on? But man, middle school was when it really started coming.
How were you taught to respond to it?
Man, I wasn't really.
Get that microphone right there, man.
I wasn't really.
Ariea, come on. Help him out with his mic etiquette.
Yeah.
Post show. I have been post show.
Okay, all right.
Post show. So you gonna let me like do the microphone thing wrong the whole time?
I love you
I was
enough to
getting ready to tell you.
Yeah.
I love you enough to tell you.
Come on, brother.
I was getting. Hey man, you need to speak into the mic, man.
Yeah, you could have like kicked me under the table or something.
You wouldn't have known what it was for.
Yeah,
it could have been a number of things. So how were you taught to respond?
Man, that's the thing. I wasn't really necessarily taught how to deal with it, man. So there would be times when I just avoid it, but there would be other times when it's like, hey, man, we're going fisticuff.
Yeah.
And, man, me and a lot of my black friends, we started to learn at a young age, like when they had those mini-series like Roots come on the night before, or they played a movie like Glory in class. Yeah. Man, we were like, hey, man, we were going home practicing sparring. It's like, we know exactly what kid's about to get racist. And man, like that's just what it was for us. Like there would be times when, somebody would say something and, we'd have to kind of catch them in isolated incidences because remember, it's like 20 of us. Yeah. And it's like 250 white kids. So, man, you had to be kind of selective in where you sort of.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I want to get to this, because both of you are Christians. Both of you attend our church. Ariea, you're an elder. So I want to get to this. But as we're sitting here talking, what people watching and listening don't know is that we're friends, and we sit around, we hang out, we talk, we have these discussions all the time, and there's a lightheartedness that we have, even as we're sitting here, that if you were just to only pay attention to like national news or social media or whatever, this seems different than that, right? So like I don't sit here in fear having this conversation with you all because there's a relational component here, which has been true my whole life. Yeah. I've just, so there's a sense in which everything that we're witnessing on the national stage doesn't connect at all with my experience. Yeah. Not at all to say that I haven't seen racism, that I haven't seen that play out, that I haven't been around it, that kind of thing. But generally speaking, I've just always had solid relationships with people that are of different race and been able to be lighthearted about it. Yeah. And if you were to just record our conversations like over breakfast or something like that, we'd all be canceled. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like we'd all be canceled.
Like we would be immediately. Wow, I'm struggling with that word. Labeled by our own community with derogatory terms. Just because of our perspective and where we stand, and people wouldn't understand where our stance is coming from, which is from a biblical perspective.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. And I totally feel that. Like, Scott and I have had some really like candid conversation. One of them I'll share right here. He messaged me a couple months ago and was like, "Hey man, what's the deal with some black people having like two last names?" He's like, hey,
hyphenated.
The hyphenated thing. He's like, hey, I don't understand it. Can you give me some perspective? But man, the number of people who wouldn't even ask the question, who would just kind of sit there like, man, I don't know. It's like, yo, man, ask the question if you don't understand something. But you also got to your point, create relationships to where you can have that safe space to ask that question, because some people, they'll get hyper.
Well, so, I mean, an example would be, and this happened in 2020, like I talked to a number of my black friends who this happened to, but like if we didn't have a relational connection and you just sensed that I was going through my contacts going, let me find a black guy in my contact so I can ask this question, because I was sincerely going like, I remember Michael Kidd Gilchrist coming to UK and going, he's got a hyphenated last name. Yeah. But since then, it seems like, man, just you see it all the time. And I'm going, there's got to be a cultural reason for this. Yeah. And so we went back and forth on what that may be or what that might not be. Yeah. But had you gone, man, Scott, I don't even know Scott. Like, am I the only black guy in his contacts that you can call for this?
Well, I'm a little bit different than people because, like, I mean, you can hit me with stuff like that, and like, it doesn't bother
Well, but that did happen during 2020. So, like, what I was partly referring to was when all the racial stuff really popped off. I had a lot of, maybe you guys experienced this. I don't know that either any of us had talked about it, but just had white friends that they hadn't heard from in forever reaching out going, hey, just want to check on you, see how you're doing, you know, like,
man,
did that happen to you all? And if so, how did that
Rod, you go ahead and take
how
this
did that feel?
Rod, you take this one because, man, you got a lot to say about this.
Man, the number of white people that were like, hey, buddy, just want to check you.
Hey, hold on a second. You are speaking in a voice that is very, I feel like you're stereotyping white people.
Hey, you see the shirt I got on? Man, you led the offensive.
We're not all Ned Flanders, okay?
Hey.
Go
so
ahead,
I had some white people come. Man, look, man, you got me up. Anyway, I had some people call me up like, hey, buddy, just, I'm thinking about you, man. I'm thinking about you. Like, hey, can we sit down and talk?
Yeah.
Like, hey, let's have a discussion here. Mm-hmm. I'm like, all right, let's talk. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so I had a lot of white people come sit down at my house. Mm-hmm. A lot of white people. And, man, to me, in a lot of those instances, I felt like it was some virtue signaling going on. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, you know, I'm kind of checking this box here. Like, hey, I want to have this discussion because, like, a lot of the discussion was really kind of like surface level stuff. Like, hey, Rod, do you want to be called like African American? Do you want to be called like person of color or black? I'm like, why are you whispering when you say black, man? Like, what like, did you really want to come here and we actually talk about like the issues going on here, or is this just like, hey, let's just sort of check this box?
So, to what do you attribute that? I mean, there's a few things I could just speculate. One would be the proverbial white guilt.
Yeah,
you know, the second would be the virtue signaling.
Yeah.
I need to feel better about myself and talk to my black friends. The third would be this maybe cultural pressure to do the work.
Yeah.
You know, and so you hear that phrase a lot, like do the work, listen and learn, you know. So there may be some people going, oh, okay, I will, you know. Yeah. But they don't know how or what that really means. And so they just call you up and go, let's talk.
Well, I also think that like Ariea and I are kind of like the easy black dudes to talk to. Like, you know, just because, hey, number one, we're followers of Jesus. Number two, we have a different sort of perspective with the way that we sort of approach things, which some people would use derogatory names towards us, some people in our own community. And it's like, no, I'm still a black dude. I'm proud to be a black dude, but man,
so I mean, even just to be frank and be clear, like some of the response to this podcast would, if they were to direct it to me, would be to say things like, go get some real black dudes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Oh, yeah. For sure. Yeah. Because, you know, like we're talking about things from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. Like we're not, man, all white people are terrible. You can't trust any of them type deal. So he and I are more approachable than some other black people would be. So that's why we had so many people reaching out. Hey, man, let's sit down and talk, because it's easier to sort of communicate or connect with us.
Okay, so I think this is an important point to kind of hit. Okay, so there's the assumption, culturally speaking, that there's a uniformity of experience.
Yes, that's right.
And based on your race.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll say it so that y'all won't take the criticism. I'll take it. But when you have, at the time, someone who was running for president say, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not making any political statements. I'm just saying that's what the man said.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? That makes an assumption that there's a uniformity of experience that if you're black, you must think exactly alike and come from the exact same perspective.
And I can only validate my blackness unless I cast my vote for you.
Yeah, which sounds yeah. We'll leave that be for a minute. All right, but
I'll just go ahead and say. He better not come say that to my face. like, dude,
he's very old, Rod.
Hey,
you cannot punch him in his face.
Look, man, you don't know what it's like to be black. You don't know what it's like to walk around in this skin. And man, I know I can speak for this brother myself. I wouldn't want to be any other color but black. Like, I love being black.
I am very grateful.
Oh, man, dude. So, like, when somebody says that because I think a different way or I might tend to lean a little bit more conservative in my viewpoints with stuff, like to say to me, well, because you don't think a certain way or because you don't say something in a particular way, that challenges, like, your blackness. It's like, man, get out of here with that foolishness. Like, hey, I probably do more for my community than you ever even thought about doing. Like, hey, judge me by what you see me investing into my own community. Like,
and I don't know. I mean, just anecdotally, we're all in a group that meets. We're about to start up meeting again as we're recording this podcast on Thursday mornings. I don't know how many black dudes we have in the group, but if I were to start going through the names, all of you guys have very different experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, you all do, just like me and James have different experiences. You know, I mean, we're both white. You know, I mean, so that's not shocking to me.
Which I think it would help. It would help with the white guilt if white people understood that the black experience is not monolithic.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah.
Right.
And so if they come to that understanding, then they won't feel the need to come to you and say, "Hey, man, how are you?" Well, are you asking me how I am about this day? Because I can run down that list about what's happened today. Or you asking me how I am about being black? Well, I ain't think about that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the other things.
Been black my whole life.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I think if people just have that understanding, like Rod just told the story about being on the bus and those kids were stuck in the back. When I was coming up, that's where the cool kids went. And the black kids would go to the back of the bus, and that's where we hung out at. And you didn't get back there until you got some type of notoriety. Like you
right.
Yeah, you sixth grade, you better not come to the back of the bus.
You're up front with the bus driver.
You stay up front. So he's talking about an experience that he had where kids were purposely placed back there. We were going back there. That's where we wanted to be. That's where the trouble happened.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel you on that. Like we when we were in school, and every school's had this black hole where you eat lunch at. You know, nothing but the black kids just sort of hanging out.
They all migrated.
We all kind of migrated to that one spot. So. Yeah, you had the choice to go to the back of that bus, though. Brother.
Yeah, we did. We had that choice. He didn't. I had the choice.
Well, hey, everybody, we're going to press pause on this episode of Locker Room. As you can tell, this conversation is going to go for a while, so join us next time for part 2 of this conversation on race.